Welcome back to our Forerunner Chronicles, and what we've been looking at recently is how the story and the scene is being set for our hero, and we've been looking at God introducing the scene. We see that God has been describing a whole new way of relationship, where this picture of a faithful servant who's been faithfully serving every and fulfilling every sort of commandment and regulation is now told that the answer is going to be grace, that mind-blowing picture of God saying it's time for a new relationship. As we set the scene, we reach perhaps the crux of this passage as we come to verses 16 and 17 of Luke chapter 1. We start to understand something of the reason for our hero. And we're told in verse 16 that he will turn the hearts of the Israelites back to their God. And I find that a really challenging and interesting statement. Remember, Zechariah is in the temple. He has waited all of his life for this pinnacle of his career, this highlight of his career, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And he, along with the other 1,000 priests from his line and the 24,000 priests who serve in the temple, all hungry and seeking after following God and representing the people to God and the nation before God. And here we have Zechariah in a temple with the whole congregation waiting outside, waiting for this fulfillment, waiting for this moment. And yet God says the role of John when he comes will be to turn their hearts back to him. How does that work? What it begins to suggest to us is that for all of the religiosity and following of the regulations and the commandments, this was a ritualized relationship rather than a relationship of the heart, a relationship that was built on love and affection. It was a relationship that was based on ritual and routine. People had been going through the motions for centuries and probably had settled into the rituals without understanding the person that the rituals were for. What we've had up to this point is that throughout the Old Testament there is a sacrificial system, and it involves the priests acting as a go-between. What we mean by that is that the people themselves couldn't approach the holiness of God. They needed a go-between, they needed a priest, they needed a vicar, for want of a better term, who would go between them and God and give these sacrifices, these atonements for what they'd done wrong. And when God steps in Luke chapter 1 and begins to say to Zechariah, I'm going to send John, I'm going to answer your prayers and John's going to come. And as we'll see over these next few verses, there's a tremendous meaning and reason for John. What we see is that this sacrificial system is about to be replaced, where Jesus is coming as the sacrificial lamb. That rather than having to keep giving the sacrifices and having a go-between and having a constant substitute, Jesus coming is going to be the substitute once and for all. He's going to once and for all make it possible for people to approach God. To maybe just unpack that and understand it a little bit further, perhaps we need to understand that Jesus' death, what we read about was it tore the curtain. And here, at the beginning of the story, we have Zechariah standing, giving the sacrifices, staring at the curtain. The altar he's giving the sacrifices on are immediately in front of the curtain. And he's told that God's going to bring this whole new relationship of grace. And we see at the end of the crucifixion, when we come to the crucifixion and the resurrection, we see the curtain being torn in two. In other words, the way into the Holy of Holies is being opened up. And here's Zechariah standing at that curtain. I just love that picture of what's going to come. Up until this point, the priests had gone in to offer the sacrifices on behalf of the people. There'd been this substitution. And it's quite possible that people had allowed that substitution of somebody else doing it for them to excuse their personal responsibility for being right with God. So the priests were the go-between. The sacrifices were a bit like, I suppose, a modern-day sense of confession. Now, I know that many people take confession very seriously, and for many people it's a genuine relationship. However, for some, there is a sense that you can give confession but not have to take personal responsibility. And this picture we have is that God is inviting people to true worship, true relationship, and that is the message of grace. The way has been opened for a personal relationship based on grace that creates the responsibility for personal responsibility. Maybe that is what's at the heart of this turning the hearts of God's people to God. The identity of the nation of Israel, would see themselves as the people of God, but even Jesus said, "These people honour me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Being identified as being part of the nation is not the same as knowing the king of the nation. And that points for us that there is a danger that we think that belonging to church or going through the motions is good enough. Attendance is good enough. That's why Jesus said to Nicodemus, who was this religious leader, this scholar who knew the scriptures, that's why he said to him, "You must be born again." Because there needs to be a point where we turn from relying on other people making decisions for us to making personal decisions for ourselves. And when the angel says to Zechariah that John will turn the many Israelites to the Lord their God, it's the same message for us today. God wants to turn the heart of many Christians into followers of him.